This lecture is going to build on the last lecture on consumer externalities, but this time I'm going to focus on environmental externalities associated with consumer externalities. That's why I have this bad title, Consumer Externalities and Mitigating Environmental Externalities, Lecture 13. So let's get right into the algebra, and I'm going to get to my point. There's a world with 10,000 people. Each of these people owns a vehicle, and they each drives the vehicle 1,000 miles per year. And so we can do that multiplication, and this world is going to drive 10 million miles. In the first case we're going to do, there's going to be only one type of car. You can think of the Hummer. And this car gets 10 miles per gallon, and we're just taking that as given. There's only one variety. And so if everyone's driving 10 million miles per year, and if the typical vehicle achieves 10 miles per gallon, we divide that, and the world is going to consume 1 million gallons of gasoline per year. That's aggregate consumption, and an unintended consequence of this is to exacerbate climate change. Now, climate change is a global externality. Each of the 10,000 people dislike climate change. They fear it, but they view themselves as too small to make a difference. So in the absence of a carbon tax, this externality is only going to compound each year because it's a flow externality, and every year people are just going to keep driving, contributing to that. Now, in case number 2, we're now going to make a switch, and we're going to introduce the consumption externality. Now let's suppose that out of every 100 people, 55 of them are environmentalists who seek to engage in voluntary restraint. This means that the population, the 100%, can be broken into the 55% who are environmentalists and the 45% who are free riders. They're just going to ignore their greenhouse gas externality in their day-to-day life. Let's make an assumption. For the 55% who want to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, but at first they only have access to a Hummer, each of the 55% are willing to pay X dollars, and we're going to solve for X in a moment, for a Prius that could achieve 50 miles per gallon. So for 55% of the population, they want a cleaner car. Will capitalism supply such a car? Will a profit-maximizing firm choose to create a Prius? Suppose that it costs Toyota F dollars to develop a Prius. It costs money to develop new varieties of vehicles. To keep the algebra simple, let's assume that the marginal cost of such a vehicle is 0. For Toyota to have an incentive to create the Prius, they're going to have to earn non-negative profits. They want to earn positive profits. Only if they're earning non-negative profits will they have an incentive to develop the Prius. Profits equals revenue minus cost, and this must be greater than 0. So let's take a look at the math. 55% of the population, and there's 10,000 of them, are each willing to pay X dollars for the Prius. So the expected revenue is 0.55 times 10,000 times X. And it costs Toyota F dollars to produce this car. So we can subtract the cost from the revenue and see if that's greater than 0. And folks, we can now solve this equation for X. And when I do the algebra, I get that if X is greater than F divided by 5,500, then Toyota will create the Prius. We're now ready to talk about the consumption externality here. Take a close look at this equation because it's deeper than you might guess. If there's more environmentalists in the population, so if that 55%, and again 55% is the percentage of the population who are willing to pay for a Prius, if a larger percentage of the 10,000 people are environmentalists, so if that number was 57% or 59%, notice that Toyota becomes even more likely to build this car. And also notice that number 10,000. If the population had been bigger, there's 7 billion people in the world, if Toyota's selling this product on a global market, then it's even more likely to be the case that this equation holds. And so this is the consumer externality. In a world where there are Pigouvian externalities associated with our consumption, like what air conditioner you choose, what car you choose, in a world where there's a fixed cost to coming out with green varieties, if there's more environmentalists, either because they're a larger share of the population or there's more people in the market, if either of those conditions hold, then green varieties are more likely to exist. This is the green consumer externality. So again, let's do this by converse. Suppose that I was the only environmentalist in the world. I'm the only person who's willing to pay X for a Prius. It's highly unlikely that Toyota would build the Prius because my willingness to pay, which might be $2,000 is unlikely to be greater than the fixed cost of creating the Prius that could be several $1,000,000. And so the more environmentalists there are who are willing to vote with their pocketbook, this creates a green consumer externality, increasing the likelihood that we have more green products. So let's calculate the environmental impact and wrap up. If the Prius is built, if the Prius is not built, we showed on slide 2 that this society would consume 1,000,000 gallons of gasoline. If the Prius is built, 45% of the population will continue to drive that Hummer and need 100 gallons per year. The other 55% of the population, to drive 1,000 miles for a Prius that achieves 50 miles per gallon, will only buy 20 gallons of gasoline. And so for every 10,000 people, you multiply that by that thing in brackets, which adds up to 0.56, and you come away that total gasoline consumption would fall by 440,000 gallons a year, assuming no rebound effect for the Prius buyers. So even in the absence of government, when you introduce this variety because of the consumer externality effect, the pollution externality declines by over 40%, as total gallons of gasoline consumed to drive the same miles shrinks from 1 million to 560,000 per year. This is free market environmentalism at work with no government here at all. Look at that happy Prius. And it was brought about by the consumer externality. And that's the end for today.